few weeks ago I went to a friend of mine, David Harrison's house. David builds Lego robots, and not like the little model things that we push around with our hands. No, he builds fully built RC robot replicas and his own creations, and they're awesome. He uses power functions, which is the Lego electronics kits that make things work. So there's motors, there's batteries, there's receivers, there's all of that jazz. And I came home thinking, I've got to get a piece of the action, I've got to do this. So, over the last few weeks, I've been building this. This is Shatterstar. It is hench. It is an axe bot with little wedgelets at the front. Big axe. It's going to come swinging over. It is powered by 2 battery packs. You can see these grey bits on the bottom, either side. One of them runs the drive motors, the other drives the weapon motors. Drive motors, if you look at the back, there's 2 large motors there. And then the weapon is powered by 2 extra large motors that are on the front. They're geared with 2 or 4 40-tooth gears, one on each side of the motor and one on either side of the weapon shaft. 2 receivers, one for each system. They're in the back there. One there, one there. This build started off with this, the RC tracked racer that has recently been available on the Lego shop. It was around about 60 quid, which is expensive, but it does come with a lot of the components. This was the basis of the machine going to be tracked. It already had a battery pack, a receiver, and a full track system with 2 large motors, which are now in the robot, so it really helped. I found it to be quite fast and thought it was a pretty good starting ground for the actual robot itself. The next job was to take it all apart and rebuild it up into a better system. Whereas the 2 motors were side by side, I managed to spread them out so that they had a bit more space to operate, and so I could fit things like the batteries and the second receiver. Other than the RC tracked racer, the only other Lego Technic set I used, other than my own little bits and bobs of supplies I have, was this, the Lego Technic Chevrolet Corvette ZR1. This provides all of the orange sections as well as some of the black bits as well. It was a really useful thing to have, especially to make that front plough. One of the bigger challenges of this build was trying to keep all the wires out of the way so that they didn't go and interfere in all the weapon system and the drive system, and also so that they couldn't be easily gutted in battle. There's some ingenious solutions, I think. Lego tracks on their own don't have all that much grip, so it was suggested that I have some of these weird blobby things to help provide it. These are made out of rubber and they fit into the Lego tracks. They're designed for Lego, and yeah, it's a solution. But in this video you're going to see that in action, because I'm returning to David's house where he has prepared to me 3 opponents to see just how well it will stand up in battle. And it's that I'm going to do now. We were taken to an undisclosed secret location for a series of challenges. Anyway, yes, the first of which was driving. The arena floor and tracks don't seem to mix very well at this moment in time. This is something I can probably redesign. The axe, however, worked very well indeed. The forks were potentially a risk, but this thing seems to cleave through armour pretty nicely, so I was somewhat confident ahead of the fights. This will change. There were 2 main reasons for going to David's that weekend. The first was to gain information on all of the robots, things like speed, things like dimensions, which you're seeing a drive test there of, and the other was to do some pickup shots of robots entering the arena for their intros. There's one we failed at earlier, gotta love a missing wheel. It did also give me the opportunity to get a lovely shot of Shatterstar entering the arena, full of smoke, absolutely delicious. God, I love this thing. My first bout would be against Block DOUGAL. This thing has reciprocating spikes, long word spikes. Basically a pokey thing that comes and jabs at you. I didn't think this would be too much of a trouble. What I didn't know was that my robot seemed to have some issue with its battery and the fact that it was being drained very, very quickly. The pushing power was maybe not there. The axe was sort of more of a tapping device more than a actual damaging weapon, which isn't ideal really when you're fighting, let's face it, a plastic dog. A little way into the fight I do manage to get a shot on the head. Of course, this does absolutely nothing as the axe isn't working very well, so David very kindly decides to open up the pit, giving one of us the chance to end this match. Probably neither of us. That's the way this match sort of went. A little while further into the match, David is managing to get a good push on me, so I retaliate by starting to shed parts of my robot for no good reason. It's very much all or nothing in the closing stages of this fight, so I managed to get the axe in a few more times. Here I think I'm going to remove the head, but in actual fact I just take the coat off the dog, and with that the fight comes to an abrupt end. Alright David, I think you won this one. After that absolute shambles, the next competitor I would be facing is the Queen of Green, Detonator. And this thing now has a lifting spike. I say now, the LEGO version has a lifting spike is what I mean. The original version is bad. So will this one do better? The thing I keep forgetting about Detonator is that spike is incredibly low to the ground, deceptively so, and every time I think I can get underneath it, and every time I'm proven very much wrong. I do manage to get a panel off of Detonator very quickly in the fight, but once again get caught on that spike, which tries to lift me up, but ultimately fails. I then manage to get underneath, and after a few hits realise that I can actually leave my axe in there and drive Detonator about. Unfortunately, my pushing and pulling power isn't as big as I would like, and this doesn't really work for all that long. David allows Detonator to have a quick peek inside the pit just to make sure it's still there before coming back for another attack. This is foreshadowing. Later in the fight, I managed to get another panel off before he gets to snag my tracks, and I thought this was curtains, but happily, it wasn't. I try and take advantage of the fact that Detonator's right by an open pit, but I don't manage it because my driving of LEGO robots isn't great, and once again, the turning circle on Shatterstar at this point on the arena floor isn't the best. David then has some form of love affair with the pit, where he goes and drives very close to it several times over. I'm just hopeful at this point that he drives in, and he obliges. The first win for Shatterstar is not because of me. The third competitor that I would be facing is Weldor Murney. Now this is really cool. Anthony Murney obviously owns the Weldor series of robots now, and this LEGO version pays tribute to that fact, so I was excited to be fighting quite a nasty spinner. In usual bouts, I let David spin up his weapons if he's got a spinning weapon. Unfortunately, I wasn't doing too well today, so I just went straight in for a box rush and stopped his spinner, taking a panel off. I very quickly realised I needed to get this fight done in as short a time span as possible, so I opened the pit, and I actually managed to take another panel off, and that's about all I managed to do before the fight turned on its head. Remembering what I said before about not being able to push and pull very well, this is all Weldor doing all of the moving here, not me one bit, and I probably should have realised that as soon as he started dragging me across the arena, and nearly pushing me into the pit as a result of it. It's at this point he manages to take a track off, and it was bound to happen. Exposed tracks versus spinning weapons. What I didn't expect to see is that my entire front wedge would also be removed from the robot. Not very well attached, and this is something I will need to upgrade.
However, in the words of Monty Python, 'tis but a scratch, so I decided to carry on and very nearly managed to win the fight by David almost driving down the pit once again. I get another hold of Weldor, but at this point, the match is done and I've lost. David wasn't done with me yet. As competitor number 4 emerged, it would be Frenzy, an axe on hammer battle. And this is one of the scariest hammers that he has. It is very powerful and very capable of knocking me the f*** out. The plan going into the Frenzy match was to get a hold of those armour panels and just tear them off. They are reasonably easy to remove, so I thought I stood half a chance of doing this, and I was proven right quite quickly as Frenzy tried to batter the top of me. My arm proved better than his. As the fight progressed, Frenzy's hammer stopped working very well. It got stuck forwards. Unfortunately, my wedge was underneath it at this time, so when I started battering the top of Frenzy, it just did the opposite and ripped my front wedge off. This was a bit unhelpful, but I continued the fight anyway, managing to break the ring around the outside of Frenzy before managing to turn myself over by knocking my axe into his. This provided a good opportunity to test my self-righting, which happily didn't let me down this time. I continued to attack the top of Frenzy, seeing as that's sort of the main point of my weaponry, just bringing the axe down over and over and over, but my pushing and pulling just really isn't up to scratch with this robot, so I wasn't able to manoeuvre it at all. I did, however, manage to take a few more panels off in the process, which is pretty good fun. By this point, the fight is just about wrapping up. Frenzy's hammer isn't very happy bunny, and this is down to the fact that the batteries on Frenzy are just slowly dying. Frenzy stops moving, I finish axing, and that is about that. A convincing win for Shatterstar at last, because, let's face it, Frenzy was already sort of dead. Unhappy with the fact that Shatterstar now had 2 wins to its name, David brought out the big guns, starting with Panic Attack. On a good day, Panic Attack is a very dominant robot, very low to the ground with its sprung armour panels, and you can't get under it very easily. I was really hoping that today was not a good day for Panic Attack. I've left this fight fully unedited because I think it's my favourite of the day. I go in straight away to try and get some hits on the top of Panic Attack, missing completely of course, and it's at this point that my turning decides that it's just not going to work, and backwards and forwards is the only way, backwards or forwards. Panic Attack meanwhile manages to snag my tracks very easily and lifts me up to have its wicked way with me. At this point there's very little I can do. Obviously Panic Attack has me in a sort of really good grip, unless it drops me like it did, but opens the pit. I think we know where this is going to go. One of us is going down there, and with my turning being really quite shoddy at the minute, I think we know which one of us it will be. Panic Attack drives me across the arena and has a good go with the forks once again, managing to get in underneath me and lift me up. However, a little bit of respite when Panic Attack then drops me, and this is where I go full-on Mortis mode. Just bringing that axe into the system as much as I can to see if I can do anything to that weaponry. Anything at all. I don't care anymore. I'm just going hell for leather. Unfortunately, I couldn't do anything, and Panic Attack gets away, gets back round me, and has another go at lifting me up. I am now at the full mercy of Panic Attack. It can do whatever it likes with me, and I wouldn't be able to do a single thing back. I'm just trying to point score at this point, bringing the axe over top to try and hit anything I can, but Panic Attack turns, lines me up with the pit, and then drives forwards. And all of a sudden, my even record is looking very lopsided against me. For the final fight, David had something special lined up for me. Unfortunately, this meant I had to go toe-to-toe with the DIDDLER. This thing is a very beefy vertical spinner, very capable of doing lots of damage, and he was very excited, almost too excited, to get this in the arena with Shatterstar. Oh good god. My tactics for this fight was just to have a flat plough going up against the vert. I thought this was probably the best tactic and it proved to not be successful at all. See, when my axe hits, it lifts up the robot, and yeah, armor panels started coming off almost immediately. I do, however, manage to get the axe into play and stop his spinner. Now, this was an interesting tactic because if the spinner stops and is stuck for long enough, it means that the motor can actually burn up and break. David, however, not being an idiot, turns the spinner off so that this doesn't happen, and then spins back up to full speed to retaliate. And retaliate he definitely does, as in a brisk moment, he removes one of my tracks, not for the first time today. So now I'm down to one side drive, and half of my wedge is just missing. The other half is also looking a bit wonky, as is my axe mechanism at this point. My tactics changed at this point to just push into his weapon and see if anything gets stuck in there. You know, just use my robot as an entanglement device. That was my only tactic going forwards. And it didn't work, as you can probably imagine. I do manage to get round the back of him and bring the axe down, but I miss, and then he removes my axe mechanism, you know, just for fun. So with my weaponry lying limp in the robot, I managed to pin David for a few seconds against the wall before having to release. These are all viable tactics for a very desperate roboteer whose robot is looking a bit like a Jackson Pollock painting. As I've already proven, I'm able to hold the diddler in place, so I then remember the pit is a thing that can come into play and see if I can go about pushing him in. David has already had previous in today's fights with driving himself into the pit, so I thought I stood quite a high chance of maybe taking a win after all. Unfortunately for me, this doesn't happen, and the diddler just goes about removing my front wedge as well, you know, just completely. And now I have a new weapon. I like to call it my motor-shaped flail. And just as an FYI to any young budding LEGO roboteers, please don't use your motors as flails. It is not a good idea. You will probably have to buy more. And yeah, the diddler removes the other side of my drive, then removes some of the mechanism that holds that drive in place, and then just goes about wrecking my robot. And I think I called finish him at this point. I've been diddled. Well, my weapon's complete. Oh God. There you can hear the maddening cries of someone who knows that their robot is pretty kaputski. Home in a bin bag. I'm going home in a bin bag, yeah. Well done to the diddler, who very convincingly won that fight. Clean up in aisle 4. There has been a spillage. Somebody get the dustpan and brush, please. Six fights, several reliability issues, and a fight with the diddler left Shatterstar in pieces. Would it ever return? Was this the end of Shatterstar? Was it heck? Shatterstar has been fully rebuilt since that day. I went back to the base, rebuilt it all. The first change I made was going from geared drive to direct drive. This means that one of the motors is on the back of the tracks, just driving it along, pulling it and making it much better, much more receptive, and it can turn on a dime now. Hopefully this is the same on a bit of wood as well. We shall have to wait and see until I can get back into the LEGO Wars arena. Secondly, I rebuilt the entire chassis from the ground up. This is a whole new build, and I'm pretty happy with it. There are a few things I need to change. I'm going to make some front forks for it. I'm also going to change how the top looks slightly because I'm not quite happy with it and I don't think it holds in place very well. But Shatterstar will return.